Chairman Hernandez. May we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Blanco?
Here.
Commissioner Hernandez? Here. Commissioner Seifert?
Here.
Vice Chair Lopez?
Here. We'll move on to the approval of the Planning Commission minutes of November 20th, 2019. Has everyone had a chance to review those? And if so, may we have a motion?
I move that we approve November 20, 2019 minutes.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We'll move on to the public comment period. The public comment period. Each member of the audience may address the commission or on any subject within the commission's business. Each member of the audience and each subject is limited to discussion of 3 minutes or as otherwise directed by myself. Is there anyone here that would like to make a public comment? That's for things not on the agenda. Seeing no one, we'll move on to the consent calendar. The consent calendar is approved by one motion. The items are read only on request of commission members. Should anyone, including members of the public, wish to discuss or disapprove any item, it must be dropped from the blanket motion and considered as a separate item.
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Go ahead and move on to the public hearings. Item number 3 is the Central Coast Commercial Vehicle Dealership and Service Facility, conditional use permit at the 1400 block of West Stowell Road. May we please have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. The California Truck Center is proposed commercial truck sales, rental, and service facility on a vacant 9.2 acre site located at the 1400 block of West Stowell Road. The zoning is M2, General Manufacturing. This site does not have a plan development overlay. The site, as you can see, is roughly triangular with Stowell Road forming its northern boundary and the southeast boundary being formed by the Santa Maria Valley Railway Corridor. And that is an active rail corridor. The project was presented to the Planning Commission at a December 5th study session. And at that time, the discussion centered around the internal truck circulation on the site, the amount of paving that was proposed, and then also the project's traffic impact related to adjacent streets. So here you can see the site in context of the surrounding development and zoning overlaid. To the northwest is County of Santa Barbara. You have PDCM Ag, which is within the city of Santa Maria and right now has some light industrial uses and also is used for agriculture. You have the M2 sites to the east and northeast. And in the distance to the south, you have a low-density single-family residential development, which is Heritage Development. So here we have a floor plan of the site. As you can see, there's multiple uses in the proposed for the building. We have a relatively large office area, a smaller retail display, a parts warehouse that also has an upper floor. And then you see the southern portion or the long stem of building to the lower portion of the building. And those are 12 service bays for the large trucks and commercial vehicles. One thing to note is that the conditions of approval require that all the repair occur within the building. Here is a depiction of the site. It shows the area of display for the vehicles. It shows where the customer and employee parking is located, and those are regular passenger-sized vehicle parking spaces. The display spaces are large enough to accommodate a truck, as are the truck parking spaces. There, I believe it was 25 by 12 is each space. Late after the packet was distributed to the Planning Commission, The applicant was still working on refining the project specifically for the stormwater control issues and this basin sizing. So if you watch the screen, you'll see how this, which is now the former site plan, transitioned to this newer site plan. The parking areas were reduced in size and additional drainage, particularly in the southwest corner of the site, was added. The landscape was also increased, the percentage of landscaping. And even with these changes, the site still meets all the code requirements. Parking, now it meets the drainage requirements, and it also meets the landscape area requirements. The one other thing I should note about the changes to the plan is as I mentioned, the parking did change. The number of display spaces for trucks was reduced down to 68 spaces. And so that reduced the required amount of parking. So it all evened out, and the site still provides the required parking, as I mentioned. One of the comments that came out of the study session was better understanding of the access to the site and also the internal circulation. So the concept from the applicant is this, where there will be a left turn lane in Stowell Road that will allow vehicles to enter the westernmost driveway to the site. You can see the circulation pattern through the site. The drive aisles and turning areas are wide enough for trucks. One thing to note is that the applicant has stated that it's very rare that they would have a truck and trailer enter their property because their service focuses on the mechanics of the cab of the truck, not the trailers. So staff feels that this is satisfactory in terms of internal site circulation, both for customer parking and for the trucks. And just to summarize the new calculations, there are 85 spaces required for the office and the display area, and they're providing 95 vehicular-sized customer spaces and employees. 36 spaces are required for the repair bays, and they're providing that 36 number of spaces. And those numbers do not include the area for inventory and the spaces for display. And again, there are 68 proposed truck display spaces and another 78 spaces for inventory of for sale and rental vehicles. One of the other questions out of study session was the improvements to Stowell Road and how that would transition to the existing two-lane portion of Stowell Road, which is in front of this site currently. You can see at the right-hand side of the screen the rail crossing. At that point, going eastbound, Stowell Road becomes 3 lanes, 2 eastbound lanes, and 1 westbound lane with a center turn lane. Essentially, that transition will move west and now be on the far end of this project site. You can see where the red line is on the south side of Stowell Road. That's where the future curb and gutter will be, and that's going to be the width of the full right-of-way of that roadway. And you can see how the entrances to the site and so forth line up with Hanson Way to the north, and then another entrance to the west. So in terms of the architecture of the building, it's a modern-looking light industrial style building. Split face CMU is used, and there are decorative horizontal bands, as you can see, on all the wings of the building. They'll be provided on all sides, and as you can see, the color scheme is in the dark grays, and there are some black areas proposed, window framing and so forth. You can also see the two different kinds of split face masonry that are proposed to be used. The site will also have some metal canopies. The most notable will be the porte-cochere for the service bay entrance, which you can see on the top elevation, the north elevation on the right-hand side. There's also thin metal canopies over the main entrance, which again, you can see on the north elevation, and at the service entrance, which is on the east elevation. The building is below the 40-foot height maximum for the zone, with the highest portion of the parapet at approximately 26 feet tall. In terms of landscaping, and I will say that this is based off the older plan, so the expectation will be that the landscaping will be modified to fill in that additional landscape open space area. But the conditions do require that the diversity of plant material shown on this plan will be carried through to the building permit. But for an industrial site, particularly one that is dealing with trucks and so forth, this is fairly well landscaped. As I mentioned earlier, they are providing over and above the 15% required. The calculation is that they're now providing 19% as landscape area with the new revised plan. I do want to just mention the environmental side of this. This did require a mitigated negative declaration. Staff conducted an initial study. We had as sources traffic studies from ATE, Associated Traffic Engineers firm, and we also had an air quality analysis from Rincon. In the conclusion of that initial study, and that initial study was provided to the Planning Commission via email. The conclusions of that initial study is that there were impacts only in terms of traffic and tribal cultural resources. So mitigations have been included. The Planning Commission has been provided with a resolution to adopt the mitigated negative declaration, along with the summary and the mitigation monitoring plan. Staff recommends that that be adopted with the consideration of this use permit. There were no other impacts identified by the initial study. And we do want to just note that staff had many communications with the Air Pollution Control District, and we did receive comments on the draft mitigated neg deck, which have been incorporated in the copy that the Planning Commission received. Those comments were minor. They were mainly technical in nature, technical corrections about references and so forth. I do have the letter from Santa Barbara Air Pollution Control District if the commission would like to look at their comments. But as I say, the initial study has been edited to include their comments and requests. It is posted on our website as well. In conversations with the applicant after distributing the draft conditions of approval, and this occurred after the packet had been sent to the Planning Commission, there are a number of conditions that they like to see modified. The first one is condition number 3 in your packet, and this merely corrects the parking per the new revised site plan. As part of the change to the landscape area, with the landscape area now being over and above the minimum 15% requirement, they have reduced the size of what was a larger entry plaza. That entry plaza was going to be credited as part of their landscape provided. Now it no longer needs to be credited, so they've reduced it in size. And that is the edits you see to condition 7 and condition 8 and condition 15. And then lastly, the applicant is requesting, and our engineering division has agreed, that the traffic mitigation fee does not need to be paid until the time of occupancy. We typically would collect fees at the time of building permit issuance. However, this makes sense. There won't be traffic impacts until the site is occupied. And then lastly, just a note, engineering staff and the applicant have agreed to continue discussions about the fee calculations and so forth. There is a fee amount noted in the conditions that it comes straight out of code. And if, in fact, engineering does work a different amount out, it does not require an amendment to the conditions. We'll just charge the appropriate fee. So this just documents that staff is agreeing with the applicant and willing to do that. So in conclusion, staff recommends that the Planning Commission, by resolution, adopt the mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and that the Planning Commission, by motion, approve the conditional use permit with the conditions as revised. And that concludes staff's presentation. I know the applicant is in the audience and is prepared to answer any questions, and staff is also available for questions.
Thank you, Frank. Any questions?
I do, Chair, thank you. Frank, my only concern on this one is the ins and outs off of Stowell, and it seems like we've got that left-hand turn lane that we were asking for. The entrance that is to the east, is that going to be a right out only, or are we going to permit crossing of traffic on that to get out on the left? What are we going to, maybe this is a David question, Mr. Bias. Are we going to allow traffic to cross at the Hanson Way area, or is that going to be a right out only and a right in only? How's that going to work?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Seifert, the present configuration allows for cross traffic, so they can, and that was ideally you want to, when possible, line up the driveways where there's a roadway across the way. So at this present time, it's going to be a full access. There is not a right in, right out.
What's going to stop that truck traffic? Like if a guy's coming from Kansas City and he sees the truck center, why wouldn't he just turn left at the first one then instead of, is he going to know to go to the turn lane and turn in? How's that going to work?
Well, as Frank had mentioned earlier, the extension of the left turn pocket will allow that movement. If there's a bit of confusion, I would, and that's possible. And because of the fact that there is a left turn pocket, it's in a left turn lane there, that allows that option for them to do that. But I believe, and that may be a question for the applicant, as typically they have entry signs, exit, and whatnot, and so that I'd like to defer to the applicant for further clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff from the commission?
Yeah, I have a question. So just regarding the traffic mitigation fees, is there a reason why the fees are negotiable or might be different?
The traffic mitigation fee, there's set calculations, set ways to calculate fees. One of the questions or one of the things that's still being discussed on this project is there is no category for a commercial truck dealership. So right now, engineering staff is using the ITE, Institute of Transportation Engineers, numbers for the most similar use that they can find. And those are all judgment calls about what is the most similar use and so forth. So I'm in a way speaking for engineering right now, but that's where there may be some room to modify the fee that we've noted.
Okay. Thank you.
So the fee in number 44 may change. That's what you're saying?
Correct. As you can see in the condition of 44, they're looking at 55 evening peak hour trips times the factor that they've selected. And those are the numbers, those factors are the numbers that may have some judgment, subjective judgment behind them, and that's what we'll look at.
Okay, and how do we reduce the subjectivity to a point where it's predictable for the applicant?
It's going to be up to the director, or excuse me,
Thank you, Frank. Mr. Commissioner, Commissioner Hernandez, right now, it's, at this time, they're estimates, and then as Frank had mentioned, we have identified classifications of uses, industrial, light industrial, and what have you. In this particular case, there isn't one that specifically identifies a truck center.
Right.
So staff did the best that it could to identify a fee. And with that, and it typically happens with developments such as this where there's not a unique, has a unique use. And so at that point, there is the negotiation period that we have with the applicant that the applicant will pay this, for a description of the project, engineering will then look to the trip generation manuals, identify the uses and whatnot, and some that are comparable to other uses. And essentially, it's a, I wouldn't say negotiation, but we look at all the potential, this is a starting point. And so we look at all the uses and again, look at the traffic studies and identify the trips and whatnot,
Okay.
and then narrow it down to a fee that we obviously talk to the applicant about and narrow it down to.
And do you, and at this point, do you expect to keep the automobile and boat sales establishment code, that category?
More than likely, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Sorry, I did have one more question. On the traffic mitigations, there are three options that were presented. How are we going to arrive at a decision on which option to proceed with?
and I'll jump in initially, but I'm sure David would like to jump in as well. It is odd to have three possibilities for a mitigation, but that does provide some options for the applicant and the city. This mitigation is cumulative. It's based on the cumulative impacts. This project by itself does not have significant traffic impacts, but the cumulative impact of this project being added to this location at the intersection of Blosser and Stowell results in significant impacts. The other developments adjacent to this project and adjacent to that intersection will also be participating in the improvements necessary to bring the intersection of Stowell and Blosser up to a reasonable level of service. So this applicant will be one participant in those improvements. And I'll let David clarify if there's any additional.
Actually, that was very well put.
Okay.
Pretty much what Frank had said. And again, during the process of identifying the exact fee for the development, again, it's we look at all the options and then fine tune it again with the approval of the Public Works Director.
Is the applicant responsible for building the improvements? It seemed like it was in option one, that they would be building the improvements, or are they paying the fees towards future construction of it? I guess, just so it's clear for them as well.
Right, at this point, it's the payment of the fees. And then the construction of the improvements they are established one of them is identified in the growth mitigation program, and then as future developments come along, the improvements will be put in when needed.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. May we hear from the applicant? Yeah. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. Is the microphone on? Okay. Good evening. My name is Pam Ritchie, and I'm a planner with RRM Design Group on South Higuera and San Luis Obispo. And I'm representing California Truck Centers for the use permit before you tonight. And as was noted in the staff report, currently California Truck Centers has a very small repair facility on South Smith Street, and so they're not able to provide all the gamut of services that they would like to at that location. So they've applied for this use permit to develop a new state-of-the-art facility on the West Stowell site. And over the last 6 to 8 months, the project team has been working diligently with the city staff to provide all the plans, technical studies and information to inform the use permit application. And one common misconception with the particular nature of the use is that it's often confused with a truck terminal. And as Frank properly described the use as part of his presentation, it's more akin to a car dealership where there's the retail sale of large commercial vehicles, parts sales, and then associated repair services. And also, as Frank noted, and this came up at the Planning Commission study session, it's very rare for a semi-truck pulling a trailer to actually access the project site. And as part of the services offered at the center, they don't do repair work on truck trailers. So I wanted to conclude by stating for the record that the applicant team supports the staff's recommendation for approval of the use permit and adoption of the mitigated negative declaration. And we're good with all the amended conditions that staff identified on their slide this evening. In terms of, we had one lingering issue, again, with the traffic impact fee, and we're pleased that staff introduced the idea that we'd like to continue to negotiate that with the Public Works Director. We feel that because it's not specifically identified as a land use in the ITE manual, that there's room for interpretation about the proper categories from the city's fee rates. So there's 3 different levels of industrial. The fee that's quoted in the calculation in the staff report is more akin to the light commercial, and we feel, since this is a M2 zoning and given the type of use and the trip generation, that the medium and industrial category might apply, so that, that's part of what we'd like to negotiate with the city related to the impact fee. And there were some questions this evening about access to the site, and the easterly driveway would allow for full turning movements. It's not just right in and right out. In terms of potential confusion with traffic, specifically truck cabs entering the site, it's anticipated that people that are familiar with the site over time will know that if they're coming in for repair services, they would go to the westerly driveway, because that's where the porte cochere and where the trucks come in to enter the repair facility would go. And in addition to myself, there's a number of other members of the project team here tonight that might be able to address any commission questions. There's Pat Lodi, the project architect, and there's 3 representatives from California Truck Center Management. And that includes Doug Howard, Lee Howard, and Mark Cook. And also there's a representative from Jeff Martin from Specialty Construction, as well as the current manager of the facility here in Santa Maria, which is Gary Ruskoff. So we have quite a different, a wide array of people here this evening to try to answer any questions you might have. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Ricci. Are there any questions for the project design team from the commission? Is there anyone in the public wishing to comment either in favor or against the project? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public portion of this agenda item and bring it back to the commission for discussion, comments, motions.
We saw this at study session. I think this is appropriate use for this property. I'm always concerned about traffic. That seems to be the biggest feedback that we get from the public, is the size of the streets, the turning, getting in and out, access. Stowell is a very busy street. We have some very big plants down there, the Bonnie Pack and the Humane Society. So, and I believe there's some other stuff we have the guy that does all the trailers too. So that's my biggest thing, is making sure that Stowell stays safe. And it seems like that's going to be, that is taken care of. So as far as the project, it's a nice looking project, and I can see supporting it.
Thank you, Commissioner Seifert. Commissioner Hernandez?
I think this is a good project. I think it's designed well. I like the architecture, and I think the applicant has done a lot, and I think it's the right location, so I would approve the project.
Thank you, Commissioner Hernandez. Commissioner Blanco?
Yeah, just in terms of the circulation and the traffic, I think, the concern on the easterly driveway, I don't see a big concern there. I think there's really no way to preclude lefts in and out. I think just because Hanson would be precluded as well. So I don't think we want to preclude their lefts either. So, and I agree with the lady that made the presentation on behalf of the applicant. I think people will realize that they got to go to the westerly driveway to come in anyhow for ticket, service, whatever they need to do. So I think that circulation will work itself out. So, and I'm glad to hear that they're going to have a left turn pocket. So I think that's a good thing. The only thing I would mention is certainly looking at the intersection of Stowell and Blosser, which will be impacted, and it's already impacted, is, having staff take a close look at that and making sure that whatever is worked out with the applicant in terms of what needs to be done at the intersection makes sense for everybody. So, and that it doesn't exacerbate the problem at that location. So, but other than that, I think the project makes a lot of sense. It's a good site for it, I think, and yeah, I like the project.
Thank you, Commissioner Blanco. I agree. It's a nice project, and that project, that property's been sitting there for quite a bit, so it'll be a welcome addition there. At this point, we'll entertain a motion. There'll be two.
Okay. There's two. There's a resolution and a motion. Okay.
And that will be resolution number 2776.
Okay. I move that the Planning Commission, by Resolution 2776, adopt the mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting program.
Is there a second?
I'd second that.
May we have a roll call?
Commissioner Hernandez?
Aye.
Commissioner Seifert?
Aye.
Commissioner Blanco?
Aye.
Vice Chair Lopez?
Aye.
And I move that the Planning Commission by motion approve conditional use permit U 2019-001 as revised by condition 3, 7, 8, 15, and 44.
We have a second.
I second it.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Congratulations. Good luck.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas. We'll go ahead and move on to item number 4, which is the Sisters of St. Francis tentative parcel map located at 124 South College Drive. May we please have a staff report?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. This is a tentative tentative parcel map for the Sisters of St. Francis property. The property is located off of East Main Street between South College and Conception Avenue and north of East Cypress Street. The project site is approximately 6.9 acres in size and currently holds the Sisters of St. Francis care home, and it used to be the Marion Hospital location, and that converted in the 1940s. The map proposes to take this one parcel and create 3 parcels. Here you see a elevation or a perspective view of the existing development. The main parcel will encompass all the current buildings of the site, and the proposed parcels, will be adjacent to Main Street, and then a second parcel adjacent to South Conception Avenue. The larger of the 3 parcels, as I say, will contain or encompass all the buildings and is approximately 5.3 acres in size. The other 2 parcels, Parcel 1 and Parcel 2, are the smaller parcels. The Sisters of St. Francis, as the applicant has proposed that these parcels are intended for financing purposes and future development. However, there is no development proposed at this time. They've also indicated that there's no proposal for development of the existing facility, additions, changes to the use, etc. So each of the parcels that are proposed comply with the zoning districts in terms of size and dimension. And I'll go back to the zoning map here. And as you can see, the 2 parcels are going to be in this area along Main and then along South Concepcion. These are primarily vacant areas of the site. There's no structures in these areas. And as you can see, they're going to be fully within the plan development, commercial office, professional office zoning, PD CPO. The remainder of the site, or the 3rd larger parcel, will have mixed zoning, but as there is no new development proposed, that's not going to be an issue for the existing site. It's operated and existed this way for many years. And there is no need at this point, at least, to modify the zoning in any way. I will just note that we did receive a letter this afternoon from a citizen that lives adjacent to the project. Their concern primarily was for future development, what might happen if new development were to go on this R2 site. They also had concerns about parking, and they noted some current parking issues in and around the location. But again, this project is simply to subdivide the site into 3 parcels, and the parcels identified for future development are those within the PD CPO zone, which is not the concern represented in this letter. That concludes staff's presentation. Our recommendation is that the Planning Commission approve the tentative map by resolution. And if Commission has any questions, staff is available, and the applicant is also in attendance this evening.
Thank you, Frank. Do we have any questions from the commission to staff?
I do, Chair, thank you. And as far as ex parte, I do sit on the subdivision committee, so I have seen this property and discussed it. The R2 zoning on this letter, Frank, so the current square footage and the parking, do we know what we've got out there already? Is it parked appropriately for the size of the units now? I mean, the people that are worried about the new units parking, what kind of ramifications are we going to have with what we already have? Have we maxed out the parking for the square footage for the uses?
Well, the existing use on the site is not truly, it's not your typical residential. It's not an apartment complex or a condominium complex. It's more towards a care home. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that I have not done a parking analysis of the existing use, but I do not believe that this use is creating parking difficulties. I've not heard that in the past.
I was just more concerned with the future. Once we do this, they could build units and they could change the whole design of the property if that's what they choose.
Well, truly, even without this map, right now, for the R2 zone, if they were to do any redevelopment of this parcel, they would have to comply with current zoning code. R2 zone would allow development of up to 3 units maximum with a staff level approval, essentially a building permit review only. Once you go over 3 units and up to 12 units, it would then be a zoning administrator use permit, and those would be noticed, and the neighboring properties would be noticed. Any property within 300 feet of the parcel would be noticed about future development. Over 12, it would come to the Planning Commission for review and approval.
Excellent.
And then the CPO, the PD CPO properties have the PD overlay, and since they are both vacant, both of those properties, the development on each of those properties would require a plan development permit through the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hernandez?
Yes, this letter talks about the parking situation. Did city staff go out and look at what the parking situation they're talking about in this letter?
No, we actually only received this letter this afternoon.
Okay.
I have not gone out to the site to look at parking specifically. I've been by the site just to look at the vacant area and so forth. I believe the applicant may be referring to the nearby areas that have multifamily housing, and those are spilling over into the areas where there are still single-family homes. The zoning, as you can see to the east of the site, is R1, and there's single-family homes in that zone. This, as part of the R2 zone, these homes along Cypress, however, the majority of those are still single-family as well, even though they have a medium-density residential designation. And then further to the west, this is where we start to transition to properties that have redeveloped or were originally developed with multiple units on them. Again, and we can hear more from the applicant about the current use of the site. But for the most part, my understanding is that this is not a high traffic generating or high parking demand generating use that's there right now.
Right. I drove by and I did see that there was a lot of parking, and I think the confusion is that maybe these people think that the R2 is actually an R1 and it's single family, but it really is a multifamily. So it seemed to confuse that in the letter as I read it. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hernandez. Any other questions for staff?
So Frank, if I'm seeing this correctly, the street parking is minimal. I mean, they have a huge parking lot. They're planning on parking on site.
The current development parks on site. The future developments will also be required to provide the code required parking on their property.
Thank you.
So we do not rely on street parking for the required parking.
Okay.
Commissioner Blanco?
Sorry, in terms of access for these future parcels 1 and 2, we would expect, I mean, there's adequate access to them. Right now, there's driveway cuts. It looked like on Google Earth that there were driveway cuts available, at least maybe on parcel 1, but would parcel 2 require a new driveway cut, or how have we thought about access in terms of those 2 parcels?
Yes, in fact, the 2 driveways that you see on Main Street are most likely not going to be used for these parcels. Main Street is a Caltrans right-of-way, and Caltrans is very conservative about new access points to their right-of-way, and that is why the parcels are designed as they are. The initial application had parcel 2 going up to Main Street as well. that would have isolated parcel 1. The reason the parcel 1 extends all the way over to South Concepcion is so that they can have access off of the street to the east. The additional factor in this is the location of the property lines between the proposed parcel 1 and 2. That lines up with an alleyway that's to the east. Again, you have a similar situation as to the truck center where we try to get those driveways to line up with existing streets and existing alleyways to make for safe left turning movements. And so that's why you see this kind of dogleg shaped configuration of these parcels. The additional application of this property line in this location also helps with some of the utility access. Again, they weren't going to be able to access utilities on Main. They have to go to Concepcion. So that's part of the reason for the configuration of the lot lines.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? May we hear from the applicant?
Good evening, Chair and Planning Commissioners. My name is Eva Turenchak. I'm a land use consultant in Goleta, California, and I'm working with the Sisters of St. Francis. So I think Frank pretty much covered everything. I do want to address the parking concerns and speak more a little bit about the purpose of the subdivision. So currently in that very large building, there are approximately 12 sisters residing. So the Sisters of St. Francis is an order that has been shrinking throughout time, and the purpose of this subdivision is to allow the remaining 12 or so sisters to age in place, while allowing the sale of portions of the property to Divinity Health so that that influx of money will allow them to continue to live there and receive the care they need until they are finished with the building. So that's really the intent at this point. There will be no physical change to the normal person driving by. You can see from the bottom right of the parcel there is a fair amount of parking. I don't know how many of those 12 sisters own cars, but I'm guessing not all of them do. So any parking situation is not being caused by this project, and as Frank alluded to, if and when development comes in, all required parking will be provided on site. So that's really all I have. I do have Sister Susan Blomstead here from the Sisters, as well as Steve Wilson, and also Ken Daleabout from Divinity Health, in case you have any questions for them as well. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Can you restate your name and address for the record?
Sure, it's Eva Turenchak with Turenchak Planning Services in Goleta.
Address?
231 Santa Barbara Shores Drive in Goleta, 93117.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Thank you. We'll go ahead and open it up to the public. I have two speaker slips. Of course, the letter that was acknowledged during the staff report. The first speaker would be Mr. Steve Wilson, who's speaking in favor of the project. Mr. Wilson, please state your name and address for the record.
Stephen Wilson, 505 Sansom Street, San Francisco. We've had the privilege of representing this order as council for many years and have walked this road with the sisters and with Dignity Health, who is their intended co-party in these transactions. As Ms. Turenchak accurately stated, the purpose of this is financing. First, last, and foremost, really. But there are some other important things here, too. The sisters, of course, have a rich legacy in this community. And as with other orders who are getting along in age, they've given intense attention to their legacy and their charism in this community, which they've served for so many years. It's their intention to benefit Dignity Health ultimately with this, and the financing aspect of this arrangement enables the sisters to monetize their real estate holdings gradually as the order needs the money for their sisters in care, and to enable Dignity to have the time to set its long-term plan for this site. So I think it benefits the community hugely to have this done, and we are greatly appreciative of the effort and thoughtfulness that the staff has put into this in taking the time to understand this. So if there are no other questions for me, I'll sit. If there are, I'm happy to field them.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Next speaker is speaking as a neutral party. Mr. Philip Cinco, I'll have 1 minute.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Chair Pro Tem, and members of the commission. It's good to be back, sort of. I am neutral on this. I just wanted, basically, I live in this area, and a number of my neighbors who I'm close to expressed some concern, and so I decided to come and hear what was said. I'm satisfied that there is no immediate development in the residential area for the reasons stated. Someday, though, that's quite likely, I think, and because of the housing, the prioritization of housing at the state level, the accessory dwelling units, that's being allowed now in R2 neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods, the R2 portions, are fairly dense already and probably only going to get more dense. The neighbors are concerned about a large-scale residential, new residential construction on that parcel. And basically, I calmed them down a little bit, but I also wanted to urge the applicant and let him know that a tasteful residential construction, if it's ever done on that site with appropriate setbacks, maybe even one-story construction, would be welcome probably by the neighborhood, but an ill-conceived design for residential construction would not be welcomed by the neighbors, and there may not be a lot they can do, but I assume that the sisters want to be good neighbors, and as I said, a tastefully designed residential construction, if it ever happens on that site, would likely be welcomed. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cinco. Seeing no other requests to speak. Oh. Ms. Farrell, please state your name and address for the record, please.
Okay, my name is Kathy Farrell, and I live at 118 South Concepcion, directly across, almost next to the alley. And I love living across the street from this property because it's quiet, it's kept up well, it's been wonderful. I do have concerns about any added traffic if it was developed, because it's very busy as it is. We have school buses dropping children off, middle school children coming down the street regularly. So again, at this point, I'm happy that there's no plan to develop it, but in the future, I just want it, for the record, that is a concern. And we have the office building at the corner now, and there is parking issues. They park along both sides of the street on Concepcion there. So that's my concern. It is a busy street as it is, coming off Main.
Thank you, Ms. Farrell. I didn't get if you were neutral, in favor, or opposed.
I'm sorry?
If you were neutral, favor, or opposed.
Neutral at this point.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Farrell. We'll go ahead and see if, is there any questions for the project design team or any other question? Can you fill out a slip, please? Sir, if you'd like, you can just state your name and address for the
All right.
record.
My name is Pete Ruse Jr., and I live at 903 Cypress, just across the street from them also. And I just kind of want to agree with what Phil said. And I'm sorry, and Kathy said also too, it is a busy street. Kids do come down that street quite a bit, and there's a bus stop. But all in all, the parking situation for the nurses, there's quite a bit of parking there. They just have a lot of parties. But I'm just, I'm just kidding, I'm sorry. But I am in favor for what they want to do with the property. And I plan on being there for quite a long time. I'm not very old, so I plan on being there quite a while. So I am looking looking to the future to see where the traffic is, though. But exactly like what Phil said, something small and tastefully done would be greatly appreciated in the neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ruiz. And at the time that there is some development plan, the neighbors would be noticed, and you folks would have fair warning to come and attend the public hearings for any future development. But thank you for participating tonight. With that said, I'll go ahead and close the public comment period and bring it back to the commission for any discussion, motions, or...
I move that we approve Sisters of St. Francis tentative parcel map at 124 South College Drive, which is tentative parcel map TR 2019-0002.
And this will be by resolution number 2777.
It says by motion on here. Okay.
Yeah.
The agenda only has a motion, so.
Yeah, it's a tentative map, yeah.
So it is resolution number 2777. Okay.
Do we have a second?
I second.
May we have a roll call?
Commissioner Hernandez.
Aye.
Commissioner Blanco.
Aye.
Commissioner Seifert.
Aye.
Vice Chair Lopez.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you.
There's a lot of people for that one too, huh? Okay, we're moving along. We'll go ahead and move to item number 5, which is the zoning text amendment for limited commercial uses within the defined light manufacturing areas. May we please have a staff report?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners, members of the public. My name's Ryan Hofstetter, and I'm the planning manager. Maybe I'll just wait a moment for folks to exit. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Commissioners. Ryan Hofstetter, and I'm going to be presenting a unique application. I know this sounds a bit confusing, so I'm going to walk you through the goal behind this text amendment, and it is just a text amendment. We're not changing the zoning of this property. And what this is for is it's related to the old COSTCO property. So that is the impetus behind this request before you. And there's very specific, unique language in our existing zoning code related, that was written really for this property, for the original COSTCO. And I have that existing language up here on the screen for you. Essentially, the property is zoned M1. It's light industrial, and that's from many years ago. There used to be a record production facility on this site, and it was a light industrial use at one point in time. And so the zoning has remained light industrial, and when COSTCO went in, this language was created, which is in our code today, and I'll just read it off for you and so members of the public could hear. It's under the conditional use section in M1, and it states that wholesale retail warehouse sales outlets of 80,000 square feet or more per use for high-volume merchandising operations, typically based on memberships, when such uses are within 1,000 feet of US Highway 101. Restaurants as an accessory use to the wholesale retail outlet may be permitted, provided the total floor area of the restaurant does not exceed 10,000 square feet. So this language was created in an effort to keep the M1 zoning on that property and allow a warehouse retailer to exist on the site. So since COSTCO has moved to a new location, we've been in conversations with the existing landowner and prospective new purchasers of the property about what can happen with this site and with this very specific language that is on the site. So in an effort to work on a solution to help fill the space more easily, we're proposing amending the language and moving the language. So we're asking for two things. So we would move it to a permitted use, and essentially it would allow a retail type use to continue on the property, but we wouldn't limit it to 80,000 square feet. This building is very large, and it's proving to be quite hard to find a tenant to fill it, so it would be ideal if a commercial use could use a portion of the building perhaps, and there could be multiple tenants where they can apply for building permits to essentially subdivide the building, not the land, but parceling out the building so that you can have different tenants in there, and it wouldn't just have to be one huge tenant in this building. So we're looking for an opportunity to help fill the space with business here. And so to accommodate for that, we are allowing as a permitted use wholesale retail sales when such uses are within 1,000 feet of 101. Restaurants, similar to the prior language, restaurants as accessory use may be permitted, provided that the floor area does not exceed 10,000 square feet. We left most of that the same, and what we wanted to do is ensure that because commercial uses are going to be going in here as permitted use in M1, that we had the parking for the use. So we added this section at the end just to make sure that any commercial uses will be required to satisfy those commercial parking requirements. So we looked at that on this property and we didn't see any issues with that and calculated that out. So that is our recommendation. So again, just to refresh, it's a two-part. It's to take the existing language, modify it to allow for multiple tenants, and allow it to be a permitted use within M1 here on properties within 1,000 feet of 101. So I just want to talk to you for a moment about what that means as far as our zoning code. So again, this is the site. This is the site here highlighted in yellow, and it's PDM1. And the language actually applies to more than one property. Believe it or not, there is more than one parcel that is within 1,000 feet of 101, that's zone M1. So we just did a check of what we've got on the ground today within 1,000 feet of 101. And I'll zoom into these in a moment here, but just so you know contextually where they are in the city. You have area number 1. This is up off of Romer neighborhood. There's a mini storage project, that's M1, and that's within 1,000 feet. You have area number 2, which is just east of Donovan in 101. That's a Carlotti Way, that neighborhood. And then finally, we have the old COSTCO property. So it would be, those areas are M1, and the language applies to them today. So a zoomed in view so you can get a feel for those neighborhoods. This was number 1 up at the north. and roam our way here. And this area here, this is has a proposal for Santa Maria Tire to be constructed, and they're in building permit process right now. This was just finished the Downs Equipment property, and then we have a vacant property here. And these parcels are really quite small to fit commercial with parking, but it is possible. So that would be a permitted use on, I'm sorry, just the light gray, so not the dark gray, that's M2. So just the M1. And there's already a mini storage on this property. So if they wanted to do some type of commercial use, they would have to completely demo their existing use. So we don't foresee that occurring here, although it's possible someday in the future. And then the other neighborhood off of near Donovan and 101 is the Carlotti neighborhood. And this is again, the properties with the yellow are all within 1,000 feet of 101. If it's outside the yellow, it's outside 1,000 feet. So it would apply to these properties as well. And then again, back to our third and final property, the old COSTCO site on Bradley Road.
Excuse me, Ryan?
Yes.
I'm going to have to recuse myself from this.
Okay.
This affects a property that I'm already contracted with.
Okay.
That I don't think it will affect them, but I'm still going to recuse myself.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Seifert.
Thank you.
I'll be in the hall.
I'm going to abstain.
Oh.
I don't think we have a quorum.
Yeah. Commissioner Hernandez will be abstaining from this vote, so I don't believe we have a quorum.
So we will have to then, so is it just we have two commissioners that have a conflict?
So you need a third one.
Right. I'm just thinking down the road.
Mine's not a conflict, but it's because there was a pre-existing business relationship that no longer, the rules apply, but I still don't feel comfortable. And to avoid the appearance of propriety, I was going to abstain.
If I may interject, so with the two recusals, because they could be a financial conflict of interest, they won't count towards the quorum. So then we are left with two, which isn't a quorum. So probably the smartest thing would be to continue it to when we have the full membership, and then the three that don't have the conflicts can participate.
Can we even make a motion to continue with two?
Well, we just won't be able to do anything further tonight, and staff will just bring it back at the next time that we know we have the full commission.
Okay, so
yeah, we will, do we need to renotice this, or can we continue to a date certain?
I think we can continue to a date certain,
So
if you have that date.
Continue to January 15th. I'm also looking at our applicant here too, because we were on a very tight timeline with this, so I wasn't aware of the commissioner's conflict here. So January 15th would be the date we can make it back to the Planning Commission, and then we would go to, because this is a recommendation to City Council for this type of item. So I would ask if the chair is okay with connecting with the applicant and see if that date will work.
Sure, absolutely. Lori?
Good evening, Lori Tamura with Urban Planning Concepts. The applicant who's brought this proposal forward is Nick Tompkins, and he is working with the current landowner to clarify the types of uses that can be on the property. Obviously, this has been a retail use for a while, and by moving this provision into the industrial zone, it frees up many more options for the property and makes it more attractive for a potential buyer to enter into this. Of course, the escrow is pending. And so moving this to the January 15th date is problematic for us. And I don't know what the process would be to allow for dual noticing so we can go to a planning commission meeting in January and the city council right after that. So we're trying to get something resolved here in January, or very early February. And so we're disappointed with this, and we're trying to think of some options.
I have a question that might help. And I'm looking to our Assistant City Attorney on this too. We had the thought of proposing language that rather than within 1,000 feet of 101, it's 1,000 feet of the 101 and Stowell Highway exit. And that would preclude those other we just were worried that was a bit convoluted, even more convoluted. So, but that would eliminate all the other areas, as on the map, areas 1 and 2, this wouldn't apply to them. So if we had commissioners that were conflicted out because of the areas on the map, areas 1 and 2, and we developed this language so that those now are not a part of this.
I think we would need to come back with that language. I think to do that tonight when we don't have we don't have a quorum, so we really can't proceed any further. We can't hear an item under the Brown Act if we don't have a quorum. So we'll have to just bring it back at the next planning commission meeting, and then as soon as you can, you get it to the council. I just don't see another way.
So do we?
So my recommendation is we continue to January 15th.
Can we take a break?
Yeah,
I want to clarify something with the city attorney.
We'll take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
Okay. We'll go ahead and call this meeting back to order. And based on still not having a quorum, I think, how do we continue?
I think staff will continue the item to the date certain of January 15th.
And that requires renoticing and all that good stuff? Okay.
We don't need to notice, we're continuing to a date certain.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay.
Well, then, did we open the meeting, the public hearing, so
Yeah,
just continue it to the next January
That's correct.
15th meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. With that, well, can we even have a meeting?
if the commissioners want to come back, we
okay.
can finish our meeting.
Yeah, because what do we do? That Dickerson. If I hadn't taken that NyQuil, I would have been hurting right now. I feel a little, heck yeah, I feel good. We can go until 10. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to other business. Item number 6, or reports from Planning Commission and staff. We have any reports from staff?
I do. Thank you, commissioners. We received some questions in the last hearing about the Madlands landscaping, and I just wanted to let you know that our code compliance has sent them a notice, and they have until February to put it in. Otherwise, they're going to have to take them to a hearing. So that's out there on the table, and that's the expectation. So I just wanted to let you know, follow up on that. Also, there are new faces here, and I was going to make introductions, so better late than never. I wanted to introduce our new Assistant City Attorney, Heather Whittam, to your commission, and she's going to be seated for Planning Commission meetings. And also, I wanted to introduce, behind me here, Dana Eady, who is our new Principal Planner with the city. So we're happy to have Dana here, and she wanted to come and get to know the commission and listen to the commission meeting, and you'll be seeing more of her in the future. So I wanted to introduce her as well.
Welcome aboard.
And that concludes my updates.
Thank you, Ryan. Any reports from commissioners? Commissioner Seifert.
I don't have a report, but we did discuss this, and I know that Commissioner Dickerson isn't here, but I did kind of ask everyone if they would be willing to start at 5:30. Is that something that's still out there and people would be willing to do versus 6:30? The city council has changed, but due to commitments at the time, some commissioners couldn't change. But I would suggest that if we could, it would probably be better to change to 5:30 if we can. I'm certainly for it. I don't know how we do that exactly.
We are going to be looking at updating the bylaws, and so we can look at updating that. Should the commission want to choose a different starting time, we would update those and include it in there. We have a couple other things we want to update too, so we could do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I mean, I was just going to comment, that works for me personally, so I don't know if it works for everybody else, but, you know, I think it makes more sense, kind of line it up with city council times and be able to kind of get home a little earlier, if you will. I'm sure people would appreciate that. They don't live nearby, so I'm all for it.
I know Commissioner Dickerson did have some issues, but he said that he would be willing to start at 5:30 if that's what we decided.
I think the only concern is that the public sometimes is not able to make the meeting at 5:30 because they get off of work at 5. And, you know, we move pretty fast sometimes. Sometimes they're half-hour, an-hour meeting, and so it'd be difficult for people to come and speak on items. So that would be the only concern.
I think what we would want to do is put it as an agenda item, perhaps first of the year, to publicize it and announce that the commission's going to be discussing amending the start time so that folks could see that and be able to weigh in.
Yeah, and I'm okay. I don't want to put a burden on any of the commissioners trying to make it here, so I could go 5:30 or 6:30. Doesn't matter for me.
Okay.
Without any further ado, any other questions, comments? We're adjourned.
Excellent.